If aliens have visited Earth before, then why did they leave? Not because we were primitive, not because we were violent, but because we reminded them of something in a sealed underground archive buried beneath 3 layers of classification. There exists a file that was never meant to be opened, not because it proves aliens are real, but because it explains why they promised never to return. Tonight, you will hear reconstructed testimony, leaked documents, and a final message that was hidden inside a recording for over 40 years. A message that ends with these words: "You are not the first. Every culture on earth has stories of beings who came from the sky. Ancient gods, watchers, angels, demons. Modern science calls them aliens. But what if all those names describe the same thing?" Because according to a series of suppressed documents, the last alien visit didn't happen in modern times. It happened long before recorded history, and when they finally returned in the 20th century, they were not surprised, they were disappointed. This story begins not with a crash, but with a descent. In official records, the event is described as an aerial incident, a meteorological anomaly, but private logs, scribbled in the margins of flight control reports, tell a different story. Radar operators across the North Atlantic reported an object entering Earth's atmosphere, without heat, without friction, and without sound. Standard physics dictates that an object traveling at such speeds should burn up, creating a brilliant fiery streak across the sky. This object did not. It simply appeared, a ghost on their screens, moving with impossible grace. Its load adjusted its course with a precision that baffled engineers. And then, over a desolate stretch of tundra, it descended vertically. A crash implies loss of control, a catastrophic failure. This object demonstrated absolute intent. One handwritten note from a forward military observer, a man whose name has been scrubbed from every roster, reads, "It waited for us, as if we were late." The first response team, assembled under a veil of extreme secrecy, expected to find wreckage, twisted metal, strange alloys, perhaps a power source humming with exotic energy. Instead, they found a craft resting on the frozen ground as if it had always been there. It was seamless, dark, and absorbed all light, creating a void in the landscape. There were no hatches, no windows, no visible means of propulsion. The team circled it for hours, their instruments failing one by one, their compasses spinning wildly. The air grew cold, and a low, subaudible hum vibrated not in their ears, but in their bones. A feeling of profound and ancient dread settled over them. It felt, as one sergeant later reported during debriefing, like standing before a tomb. Then a section of the hull dissolved. It didn't slide open or retract. It simply ceased to be, revealing an interior of absolute blackness. And from that darkness they emerged. Witnesses initially believed the entities were wearing some kind of advanced environmental suits. Medical sketches, recovered years later from a psychologist's classified files, confirmed something far worse. Their skin was the suit. It was pale, thin, almost translucent, with a network of faint, pulsing blue lines visible beneath the surface. They were tall, impossibly slender, their limbs moving with a fluidity that was both graceful and deeply unsettling. Their faces were devoid of features as we understand them, except for 2 large, dark, ovular eyes. But these were not eyes that simply saw. Witnesses reported a terrifying phenomenon. When you looked into them, you didn't see your reflection. You saw memories, not just your own, but fragmented images of events that had never happened, of cities made of light and stars dying in silence. Their eyes reflected memories instead of light. But the single detail that caused every seasoned soldier and scientist on site to panic: they cast no shadow. In the harsh glare of the team's floodlights, the ground beneath them remained perfectly illuminated. One survivor, a communications specialist who spent the rest of his life in a secured medical facility, later said, "That's when I realized the light wasn't touching them. It was avoiding them." The beings did not speak, but a voice entered the minds of everyone present. It wasn't sound. It was pure thought, a concept translated directly into their consciousness. The message was simple: "We have returned." The commander of the operation, a decorated colonel, stepped forward, his hand cautiously raised in a gesture of peace. He began to speak the pre-approved first contact protocol, but the voice interrupted him. "Your words are unnecessary. We see your history. We feel your intentions. The lead entity then raised a long, three-fingered hand and pointed, not at the commander, but past him toward the horizon. The voice in their minds spoke again, and this time it was laced with a sorrow so immense it brought several men to their knees. You have built upon the ruins, but you did not learn from them. What happened next is the core of the cover-up. According to the fragmented testimony of the few survivors, the lead alien projected an image into the air. It wasn't a hologram. It was described as a window into another time. The team saw Earth, but not as they knew it. They saw sprawling, crystalline cities that pulsed with internal light, oceans that were a different color, and two moons in the night sky. And they saw people who looked exactly like us. They were laughing, working, building a civilization of unimaginable beauty and complexity. And then the window showed them turning on each other. It showed them discovering a power they couldn't control. It showed their beautiful cities turning to dust, their oceans boiling away, and their world cracking apart under the strain of their own hubris. The last image was of a handful of survivors, huddled in caves, their technology gone, their knowledge lost, staring at the sky as their world died around them. They had devolved, forced to start again from scratch. The alien voice returned, its sadness now mixed with a chilling finality. This is where you came from, not the stars. Here, you are the echo of a people who destroyed themselves. We came to warn them, and they did not listen. We have returned to find you making the same choices. Your weapons, your divisions, your pride. It is all the same. The cycle is repeating. The beings turned and walked back into their ship, the opening sealed behind them as if it had never been there. The craft lifted from the ground without a sound, ascended into the clouds, and vanished. It didn't accelerate to an impossible speed. It just ceased to be in our reality. Left behind on the frozen ground was a single object, a small, smooth black dodecahedron. When a scientist tried to pick it up, it disintegrated into fine gray dust. For 40 years, the only other piece of evidence was a single, continuous audio recording from the site, which was believed to be just static. It wasn't until the advent of advanced digital analysis in the early 2000s that a hidden signal was found buried deep within the noise. When isolated and decrypted, it revealed a final 5-word message, repeating on a loop. The last words the visitors left for humanity: "You are not the first." The file concludes with a single, chilling directive signed by an authority so high it is represented only by a symbol. The directive reads, "Erase all records." The truth is not a deterrent, it is an invitation. They didn't leave because we were a threat to them. They left because they knew with absolute certainty that we are a threat to ourselves. They had seen this story play out before on this very planet, and they had no interest in watching a rerun. The greatest secret is not that aliens came to Earth. The greatest secret is that we are the aliens we've been looking for all along, the descendants of a lost civilization who already had their chance and failed. And now the question is not if they will ever come back. The question is, what happens when we reach the same point of self-destruction that our ancestors did? Will we listen this time? Or is our end already written in the stars, a forgotten memory waiting to be repeated? The most chilling part of the testimony wasn't what the soldiers saw, it was what they heard. But here's the twist. These beings never spoke. They didn't have mouths. They transmitted. Multiple witnesses described the same terrifying experience, thoughts flooding their minds that weren't their own. They saw images, forced into their consciousness, of sprawling cities being built at impossible speeds. They watched entire civilizations advance from stone tools to starships in mere moments. And then, just as quickly, they saw those same civilizations disappear overnight. Poof, gone. This wasn't a history lesson. It was a loop, a repeating nightmare, again and again and again. The beings showed them Earth, not as our home, not as a planet teeming with life, but as a process, a factory, a cycle. And when they finally referred to us, to humanity, they didn't call us human. They called us Iteration 7. The soldiers expected a warning about nuclear war or climate change or some rogue AI. We always think we know what's going to get us in the end. But the warning was about something far stranger, something we rarely consider a threat. It was about memory, according to these beings. Every civilization, every iteration, eventually reaches a point where it begins to remember too much, not just its own history, but the histories of those that came before. It's like a form of collective PTSD, echoes of past apocalypses seeping through. And when that happens, when the memories become too strong, the system resets, the process starts over. One officer, brave or foolish, managed to ask the crucial question: how do we stop it? The response was instant, and it was devastating. You already tried. Among all the classified files, the evidence that was supposedly destroyed, one thing survived: a single 12-second audio recording. At first, it sounded like static, just meaningless noise. But when technicians slowed it down, they discovered something truly impossible. It wasn't one sound. It was thousands of layered voices. Some were speaking backwards. Others were broadcasting on radio frequencies that hadn't even been invented yet. It was a message from the past, the present, and the future, all at once. After weeks of work, they finally decoded a fragment, and the message was not from the aliens. It was from us, or a version of us. It said, "You taught us how to end worlds. Now you will do it to yourselves." The story gets even stranger. 3 of the lead technicians who worked on decoding that tape vanished. Not at the same time, but one by one over a year. No bodies were ever found, no ransom notes, no evidence of a struggle. The only clue left behind was that their families all reported the same thing. In the weeks before they disappeared, each of them had been having identical, terrifying dreams. This is where the story goes from a classified military encounter to something much, much older. One researcher, going against orders, started digging into ancient texts, into folklore, into myths from civilizations that have long since turned to dust, and he found them, in culture after culture, separated by thousands of years and vast oceans. There are stories of beings who arrived just before a great collapse. They're never gods or saviors. They're never monsters or conquerors. They are always described the same way, as witnesses. They come to watch. A declassified internal memo, which you're not supposed to see, directly links this modern alien encounter to a global spike in shared nightmares. It connects it to reports of sudden, inexplicable religious visions and, most disturbingly, to a pattern of unexplained mass suicides. It's as if their arrival didn't cause the chaos, but instead reactivated something ancient and dormant within us, a self-destruct sequence buried in our own DNA, just waiting for the signal. Digging deeper into these ancient texts, a disturbing pattern emerges. They all describe beings who appear just before a civilization collapses. But here's the twist: they aren't saviors, and they aren't conquerors. They are described simply as witnesses. One classified memo I found connects these supposed alien encounters to a chilling trifecta of global phenomena: shared nightmares reported across continents, sudden, intense religious visions experienced by thousands simultaneously, and a spike in unexplained mass suicides. It's as if their arrival reactivated something ancient and dormant within our collective consciousness. What were they witnessing? What did they awaken? And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they left. The final document in the entire dossier is the most terrifying. It's just one sentence, typed on a stark white page. No signature, no date, no explanation. It just says, "Departure confirmed. Replication complete." Replication of what? That's the question that kept me up for nights. And the answer, I fear, is us. They didn't come here to study our nature or our biology. They came to study our methods, our surveillance systems, our weapons development, our most secret and dangerous experiments. We thought we were observing them, but they were replicating us. We became familiar to them, too familiar. So, if these beings returned today, they wouldn't announce themselves with triumphant fanfare or blinding lights. They wouldn't land on the White House lawn. They wouldn't even need to speak, because according to that final hidden file, they don't need to. The message was already delivered. The replication is already complete. And when the next great reset comes, when our civilization collapses just like the ones before, we won't remember this story. We won't remember this warning, but something else will.